Okay. All right, I think we are good. Hi, everybody. How are you? All right. We're going to go ahead and get our meeting started. Let's see. Just see if there's anybody else. Here we go. All right. Are you guys ready to get started? We're going to get started. All right. You ready? Okay. Okay. Here we go. So you guys, welcome. Welcome to the first in-person meeting. Let me get here with my slideshow. There we go. Welcome. So welcome. It's can't believe it's already May, which is like super exciting. We have a lot of new people. So thanks so much for joining us. Please, before you forget, make sure that you private message Dan with your email address and your name. Sometimes it comes up different on the Zoom meeting. So it might just say, you know, Jim's iPhone or something like that. And so we want to make sure that we mark down how much attendance that we have for the meeting. So please be sure to do that. Typically, we meet the second Thursday of every month. And we will try and do some social time a little bit before the meeting so everyone can test their audio video. And then we'll try to wrap up between 7:30 and 7:45, depending on how many questions we have. So just some news and updates about the Guild. So we do, we are meeting right now at the, wait. There's a side conversation going on that we haven't had to deal with because we haven't had in-person meetings. All right, so anyhow, so we a couple things. We are looking for some alternate locations. We're working with the hotel, but apparently since COVID is now releasing a little bit, we actually you know, they're actually having other groups wanting to rent the space. So because they're giving this to us at no charge, we're going to see what we can do to work that out. But if you do have some other location options for us, please let us know. Also, in the month of June, we were interviewed for the San Joaquin magazine. So in the month of June edition, we're going to have a little article that will help feature the Big Valley Beekeepers Guild. So we're super excited about that. And then, of course, remember that we have our private Facebook page for those who have attended a meeting and who are local to the area, although we have opened that up a little bit. And along those lines, something that we announced last month was we are now taking memberships. We've discovered that in a virtual world, especially, there's things like Zoom fees and speaker fees. Sometimes speakers can cost as much as $300. So we really need to start doing some fundraising and getting some sponsorships. So what I want to do is be able to publicize, or I guess, you know, gather. We want as many memberships as we can because that'll help us provide for that each year. And we want to keep the same quality and the same level of speakers that we've had. So, so if you haven't already joined, please do. And it's only $20 a year. That's less than $2 a month. That helps us with the speaker fees, with the Zoom fees. And it helps us provide some additional resources as well. So for now, though, for right now and for next month, we'll be meeting here at the hotel, and we'll have pollen patties for sale. We're still limited to how many people we can have here. So we want you, if you're going to be here in person, please reserve your seat. If you're not able to be here in person after all, please let us know so we can open up the seat to someone else, especially as we have more people attending in person. So quick shout out to Chris Espinoza. So he did sponsor our Zoom meeting fees for this month. We really appreciate his help. And if you're interested in being a Zoom sponsor, please email us, let us know. It's bigvalleybeekeepers@gmail.com. And with that, we're going to open it up to our speaker. So just so you know, if you haven't already met Daniel, runs the BlueGreenHorizons Bee Rescue. Him and his team actually divide up their time between a nonprofit community bee rescue in Northern California and an LLC that's dedicated to that research and development for rescuing bees with novel inventions to aid in their removals. It's fascinating when you take a look at his webpage or at his Facebook page, the different videos. Just even maybe 2 weeks ago, he was at the Sacramento Zoo and in the lion's den. So he has always fascinating stories. BlueGreenHorizons specializes in complicated bee removals, right? That might involve a cutout or trap outs, along with feral swarm collections. And we have many examples of these kinds of relocations being documented by DW. So he's a wealth of information and knowledge. And he answers a lot of other beekeeping questions as well. He's been a speaker on many panels, and we really are excited to have him here. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen, and I'd like to welcome DW.
Thanks. So we're going to kind of go through two things kind of fast tonight. This first part is a presentation I made for kind of a Friday night after we'd all had some drinks at a regional conference on beekeeping. But it was kind of light and fun, so I thought I would incorporate it. And like I said, we'll probably go through it kind of fast because it's kind of a little bit about, why we hack. And then I want to get right to more of a Q&A thing. I know there's some questions about throning and some of the types of devices and stuff we use for cutouts, trap outs, and swarm retrieval. So we're going to go through this first thing, and then we'll see if we can take questions and finish out with discussing some of the methodologies we use. So I'm going to try and share my screen here.
All right, looks good.
So I was lucky enough to be raised on a farm. Hold on a second here. I'm going to try and go back here. Okay. Anyway, and one of the benefits of having living on a farm is you become very self-reliant. And I also benefited from my father being not only a farmer, but an engineer. And so that's where my background comes from. But beekeeping has always been a little bit unique. Ever since I was a young man, I swear that beekeepers used things for purposes other than they were designed more than any other group I'd ever seen. And that's actually not so unusual, is that beekeeping more than anything else is localized, more than any other livestock. And I think that hold on a second here. And that is one of the reasons is that beekeeping really goes back to ancient agriculture. And ancient agriculture, everybody had very limited resources. And so livestock farmers, as much as anybody else, became very, very good at making do with what they had around them to accomplish the purpose that somebody else may have told them about. Before I go too far, I do want to mention this safety. I'm very big on safety. It's important when you are building hacks and doing things with insects that can sting, that you are very careful and do everything you can to be safe. Hacking is an interesting history all of its own. The word hack is probably one of the first hacks. The dictionary will give you lots of different things. A hack is a board. Of course, this would just probably attract yellow jackets in the beekeeping world. It's often used as a verb to do something, and we sometimes do hack limbs and trees. We don't do too much computer hacking in beekeeping, but I anticipate that will change in the near future. And of course, we all understand that, not every hive can hack it. So we get into thinking about what we're doing when we're hacking. And hacking is really working a problem backwards. It's I've got to do this, and how can I get that done because I don't have the thing that would normally do that. And so we've all enjoyed watching all the different kinds of hacks that we see around us. And in beekeeping, I think it's one of the most fun aspects, as we're all trying to accomplish slightly different things using slightly different tools. We joke about this out there. I give a MacGyver award every year for the best beekeeping hack. And I think we've all taken some inspiration from the culture that developed around that show. One of the most interesting things about hacking was that the first time that we have in recorded documentation that the term hacking was used was a model railroad club who was apparently modifying the wiring to get higher speeds on their model railroads, of course, causing much problems with the equipment. So that's our first time that we've seen the word hacking used. Also, it was fun to come back that the Railroad Club later became the Robotics Club. So that gives us some indication of that hacking was maybe more important than train tracks. So one of the things we want to talk about always is the difference between an innovation or an invention and a hack. Most hacks use inventions, but not all inventions are hacks. The internet, as we now know it, was an invention. It was a brand new technology brought out. But virtually as soon as the internet connected people, computer programmers started developing hacks to be more expressive. And like all hacks, over time, they become quite a high art form in and of themselves. The emoji is our current iteration of all that ASCII hacking back in the late 80s. Of course, discovery leads to invention and modification. I'm sure that there's been many various attempts to build boxes, and they still continue, but we all go down to the same rules and the same inventions when it comes down to the base and foundation. A lot of the beekeeping things that we do are probably inventions or hacks, and one of the most fun things we get to do is debate these things. I think that the extractor was an invention. I think swappable bee boxes was an invention, and probably smokers were more of a hack, because I've seen the old canister smokers that were used in the 1400s, and you can easily see how they just slowly hacked and improved smokers over time. The hive tool probably just is a hack of bending the thing. One of the other things about hacks is they evolve. They start inventions, become hacked into increasing complexity. One of our fun debates always is which came first, the pry bar or the hive tool. So sometimes I get to think back about what I thought my first hack was. And when I was a young man, I built really, really big kites. And so I ran across a water pump one day and realized that instead of pumping water, if I ran it in reverse, it could wind up a string. And that changed the size of my kites for some time. And then as I was going to the internet to look up, I saw this is now the new iteration of that simple 12-volt pumping system like I did back in the 70s. Now you can get one with remote control, Wi-Fi apps, and elevation and tension controls for your kite. Hacks often become devices. So when we talk about hacking, we want to always think about designing back from what we're trying to accomplish, but to build sideways. And by sideways, we mean to find things that will do the same thing as the thing we don't have. Necessity is always the mother of the hacking. I think I'm going to go through some of this. I wanted to talk about one of the most useful hacks that I think is out there, and that is the scion. The scion, the Russian scion, was first noticed as that the bees would often swarm and land on the cloths that they used to filter the wax, and that later became a Russian scion when they would wrap that cloth around a pole in the center of their apiary. And this is something that we've almost all forgotten about and is really important. And I don't know how many of you have had a few swarms get out of reach quickly, but a scion is probably the simplest way that you can help control where those swarms land. Swarms rarely go directly in from box to box. So a scion always gives you that opportunity to catch and control that swarm until they either go into your box or you can retrieve them. I think we're going to go to a partial question and answer period here so that we can talk about some of the hacks that you've thought about or questions that you'd like to ask. So I'm going to pass it back to somebody to pick up the questions from the thing.
Oh, yeah. Hi, DW. So let's see. I don't know if any have come in so far. I think everybody's listening pretty intently. So let me take a look here. Let's see. I think we answered Lynn's question about syrup. So that was early on. Let's see. Let's see. Sorry. A lot of commentary here. All right. I don't think we have had any questions come in yet. Does anybody want to unmute themselves briefly and ask a question over the webinar?
Well, what's the best pheromone to attract the bees?
Okay, are you talking about in terms of a bait hive, or
Yeah.
what are you trying to attract?
Yes, a bait hive.
Well, the single strongest attractant to honeybee is brood comb. So the first thing you always want to have in a trap is some section of brood comb that's been used before. Now, in order for the bees to locate that brood comb, which has not a strong smell, an attractant such as an essential oil, like lemongrass, there are several commercial products, perfume, Chanel No. 5 works as good as anything, because initially what you're doing is just attracting the foragers to locate the brood comb. Now, if you don't have brood comb, you can also just rub the inside of your bait hive with some old beeswax that you've melted down recently. But brood comb is by far the strongest attractant. And your pheromone or what you're using to attract the forager can be quite varied and quite simple. One of the other things that's really important in terms of thinking about trapping bees are there bees there? It doesn't do you any good to set a trap where there aren't any bees. So, but if bees are there, lemongrass oil or any, I've used most of them and have seen no difference between that and lemongrass oil. The only thing I can say about lemongrass oil is it's way too much is used, and then it becomes a problem. So It's very concentrated. You're talking about it taking a Q-tip and then wiping that Q-tip on a frame or something. That's all that you need in a trap.
So when you say brood comb, what about just honeycomb? That's not as good as brood comb?
Not as good as brood comb.
Okay, great. Well, thank you.
Good question, Ernie. All right, DW, it's all yours.
Okay, so I'm going to go through a couple of my little ones, little hacks here, and then we'll maybe get to the throne and the throne system. We do so many cutouts, and of course we have to we try to reframe our comb. We use a process called SEC, where we separate the bees, we evaluate the resources, and then we recombine. And one of my pet peeves is that I kept, I didn't want to cut the comb twice. It's too hard to hold a frame up. Paul and some of the other people that do cutouts know you're often in a tight space and everything else. And so I decided one day I was going to get a piece of wood and mark on it and put a string on it so I could always have something to put up there to measure my mite. So the first thing I did was I went out to the bee yard and I grabbed a couple end pieces because I said, well, this will tell me how big I need to cut my piece of wood. And then as I was walking over to the saw to cut a piece of wood, I looked down in my hand and said, oh, I have a piece of wood that's exactly the right size. And so I just took that, drilled a couple holes in it. That gives me my 2 scribes. And now I have perfect comb to fit my frames. And so I find that a nice, fun little hack, particularly, and you people that do a lot of cutouts will know that it's just a mess to have to cut the comb twice. So I talked about this earlier, and this is what I kind of call a medium hack, in that I'd used scions for the longest time, and then saw somebody else had published this. So this isn't my hack, but they were, one of the issues I'd have with my scions is I always have to waterproof the top because I don't want them to get wet. Bees don't want to be on wet. And he just used the top of a bucket. And I thought, boy, talk about brilliance. This really works well. And this is I would recommend everybody that has an apiary that has swarming issues occasionally, put up a couple bucket top scions. You just lower them down into a vented bucket and you're done. You can set them aside and get a box ready and do all the other things later. So this has been a really fun thing this year. So I wanted some people get back to questions, or we can go on to the throne here, but I always want to hear what hacks people really have found useful over the last year that they've heard about from other sources, or if there's any other questions about some hacks.
Let's see. Well, let me ask the folks that are here in person. Do any of you have any hacks that you'd like to share?
When you're trying to catch a swarm, sometimes you get some bees that are a little stubborn, don't want to come off a tree branch or something like that. If you just take a frame of comb, brood comb, just hold that frame up to the tree, the bees will walk onto it. Or I've actually, and I know DW has done it as well, he's taken a couple frames, and I usually just take a piece of twine and I tie them together and I hang those in a tree, and the queen's looking for a place to hide, so she'll go inside in between the 2 frames, and you get all the bees, and it's you know, sit back and have a beer while you wait for them to do whatever they do. But it's as easy as that sometimes, just putting frames on next to a swarm.
All right. Awesome. All right. How about anybody else in the chat, or anybody else they would like to unmute themselves and share maybe some hacks they've used?
Well, I'm going to continue on with something that Paul was going over, that I got a fun opportunity to take to an extreme earlier this year. One of the beekeepers had a swarm that landed up about about 46 feet up in a tree. And for many reasons, it just wasn't accessible at all. So I took a baseball that I had an eyelet in and I threw it. It took several attempts, but I threw it right next to and over the limb that the bees were clustered on. I pulled that down and then I attached a frame of a brood comb to it. I raised it up, let it sit for 5 minutes, lowered it down, shook those bees into a box, raised it up, repeated that. On the third time, the queen was there. And so by the time I got it up for the fourth time, all the bees had came down from the tree and were in the box. Brood comb is that attractive to these bees. It just has to get into contact with them in that case where I pulled that up over that limb. Somebody asked about a swarm inside an old wall, and they're going to have to give me more information than that. We do so many.
Oh, hi, DW. This is Anna. I was just wondering because I had referred someone who was looking to remove a swarm. So this is not related to the topic that you're talking about. That was just a question for later today.
Yeah, I'm not sure which one that is. We're booked up a few weeks, but
Okay.
if you give me more information later, I can tell you what the status is.
Okay, thank you.
So,
All right.
go ahead.
No, it's okay, DW. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I just wanted to find out where you guys wanted to go. I have that presentation on the throne because I did go through that hacking kind of fast because usually we're talking about more specifics. I know at the regional conference, we spent a little time and perhaps I'll put a couple topics out here. I know people have questions about vacuum cleaners. I know Paul uses them very successfully, some of the other people. But here's an opportunity if you have some questions about how we vacuum bees to ask us. We use a complete system. We're really, really happy with it. We use it over 100 times a year, if not 200 times a year. So if anybody has any questions on vacuuming, this would be a good time to talk about them.
Yeah, let's see what we have. I know we do have a question regarding a scion. Let's see, trying to look through here and see if I can find it. I think it was Justin. Justin, do you want to go ahead and unmute yourself and ask her the question about the scion?
I just want to know what a scion in beekeeping is.
Okay, the term scion actually means a piece of a branch. The first use of it historically was the Russian beekeepers who would wrap their wax cloth, the cloth they used to filter the slum gum out of the wax products. They would wrap it around a branch and hang that branch up at the ends of their apiaries. Reproductive swarms have a high desire to go to a resting spot. That resting spot can be something nice and convenient. I know Paul probably smiles every time the person says 6 feet off the ground. But sometimes they can go up to the height of 45 feet, then it becomes quite a chore. We get a lot in the 30-foot range all the time also. So what a scion does is direct them to a landing spot that you control and place. So whether it's hanging a frame like Paul was talking about, or in the case of those pictures I showed earlier, those were branches that were waxed with slum gum and rubbed with very warm melted wax leftovers, and hung neither downwind or upwind, but side wind to the general prevailing winds of your apiaries. What the queen wants to do is she wants to break her scent trail with her old hive. So she's not going to go downwind, she's going to go crosswind. And if you provide them with a landing spot that they think bees have used before, we've all seen the wax droppings that they leave behind when they form a swarm cluster on a branch. So we're just imitating those wax droppings on a branch. Bees really like to land where other bees have been before. And so if you have scions at the two ends of your apiary, there's a high likelihood that your swarms will land there. And then if you have them in such a way you can lower or get access to them easily, it becomes quite easy to then recover those so you can put them into another hive box. There's quite a bit posted on it. I have numerous designs on my Facebook page, and I think if you search the web, you can come up with quite a few designs. I think the bucket top one is just so easy and convenient. You just need to keep a screened bucket around, and you can just lower the swarm into the bucket and set it aside until you have a box ready. So does that answer your question?
More thoroughly than I expected. Thank you.
That's great. So yes, so I think DW, if you want to go into thrones, that would be fantastic. And I just want to do a quick plug because we've had between 25 and 30 people on today, which is great. Just a reminder that if you attended today's meeting and you got something out of it, then we really truly invite you to join the Big Valley Beekeepers. Again, it's less than $2 a month. This is our infomercial, and we want to continue to have great speakers. So please definitely take some time to join us and help support beekeeping in our area. So with that, DW, I have to tell you, I finally built my own throne. I'm very excited, but I haven't had a chance to use it yet. I've just been crazy busy with work. So we need to have a throne building party, I think.
Sure. And you have to have two of them though, because one will never be enough. So
we've seen the back of your truck.
Yeah. This is part of a series that I'm doing on cutouts, trap outs and stuff. And basically this is public swarm retrieval, which is what I focus on in the urban area. Whoops, hold on a second. I assume you can see this. When I started re-beekeeping 5-6 years ago now, when I retired and sold my business, it became really apparent to me that I had to up my game because of both the numbers and the location of the swarms. Where I was from, they were all in the country because everything was country. And here I was getting them out of McDonald's parking lots, in front of scared people's houses, much more a variety of response. So we started studying this as seriously as we could. So I want to talk a little bit. So if you are going out there and doing swarm retrievals, it's really important to remember you're representing your club, beekeepers and the bees. And people have a degree of fear about this process. So it's really important that we try to do the best to calm them by being professional. I also want people to be really safe out there. Again, these are bees. Gravity doesn't care that you're saving bees. And I really don't want to have stories about a beekeeper getting injured from a ladder or a roof fall or something. I find it really convenient if you're doing public swarms to have a simple handout. We have one. I actually have that available in a modifiable Word document so people can share that. It saves you a lot of time answering the same questions over and over again. We also provide, as part of the, to help fundraise, we also try to give a link to the local bee club so that people can, thank the bee community for getting that swarm by donating to the local bee club. Sometimes it's also important that if you're going out on these things that you think it out so that you can finish the job. There's nothing worse than leaving 10,000 confused bees at somebody's house. So really have a plan. Of course, swarming is a wonderful thing, but it's also scary to people that aren't used to bees. It's really important if you're going to do a lot of swarm catching to really have a good understanding of the reproductive process. There's some really excellent work out there that I recommend. But then we get into the fact that in the urban environment, we have a huge variety of where swarms land. And I'm sure that you've all posted pictures from everything. This is not cutouts, this is just reproductive swarms. You also have to be careful, particularly being able to determine whether it's a swarm before you waste your time going out. So we recommend that you have a good set of questions that you ask people to assure yourself you know what's going on. We go out to some very, very confusing. We also track our swarm catches and keep track of the swarms, where we caught them and how they do over the time. At first glance, it looks like the bees live in the city, but the reality is these are reported swarms. So this is more likelihood of, we see more reports where the population is denser. And in Sacramento here, that's between Highway 50 and Highway 80, and then down through the Delta.
Hey, DW, question for you. So have you compared one year's map to another year's map, and have you noticed any trends?
Again, you have to remember that this isn't a cross section of where bees are. This is a cross section of where bees are reported. And so you have to take that into account with the data that we generate. So because they're bees that are reported, not the timing, we do see a march up the valley every year of swarm reports, but where we see swarms is really dependent on where people are to see them. We had the unique experience last year of having a huge number of people at home between the hours of 10 and 4. As most of you people know, that particularly early in the year, that swarms start coming out of when the air temperature gets up there a little bit, about 10 o'clock. Well, if you've gone to work at 8 and a swarm goes by your house, you don't see it. And if they've clustered in a tree, the odds are when you come home at 5 or 6 o'clock in the evening that you're not walking around your yard going, are there any bee clusters in my tree? So a lot of bees get overlooked even in populated areas. Well, with COVID last year, we suddenly had everybody home and we got a huge increase in the number of swarms reported. We saw that again this year to some extent, but we have also seen it reducing in the last month or so because people have gone back to work. Where we see that change then is we then in about a month, we will start getting a large number of cutout requests because those bees went someplace and now they're brooding and they're seeing the first large orientation flights. So we do see some interesting patterns like that. Both last year and this year, besides being COVID years, were early warm and wet springs. And that really benefited all the bees, not only managed bees, but the feral bees. So we have had 2 years of very, very high swarm numbers, over 150% of average.
Wow, that's incredible. Thank you.
One of the things I'll mention here, before I go on with the thing, is that one of the numbers you need to think about here is that in the spring between February and March every year, over 2 million hives come into Sacramento. And some number of those hives are going to swarm. We could guess at that number, but if 5% swarm, that would probably be considered fairly reasonable number. So if you take 5% of 2 million hives, you come up with 100,000 swarms from the almond groves all by itself. I would say that a number of those are captured by the almond growers themselves. They get reported in trees or they have bait boxes out themselves. But still, that's a large number of swarms that come out into this valley every single year. So when we first started here, as I told people, I put myself out, and when I was a kid, we got 2 or 3 swarm calls a year and maybe a couple cutouts. And they were like, oh, great, a cutout, we'll go have fun. In the first 2 weeks that I'd put out here that I could help with those things, I recovered 8 swarms and got appointments for about 8 cutouts. And that was in the first 2 weeks. And when that happened, I realized that I was going to have to take a serious look at the whole process so that I could put it together in a way that I could accomplish those kind of numbers. Carrying 8 deep boxes out every week to shake swarms into was not going to work. So we tried to do a lot of work with the old historical documents. I tried to review what was currently going on. And then I wanted to put them into a system that I knew that fit the biological aspects of the bees. And so that's where we developed what we call throning. We had great historical information. In many ways, things haven't changed. Here you see a couple pictures of boxes that are being held up to swarms, tanging, which is one of those myths that actually works. And then there's a gentleman with a piece of a comb nailed to the end of a board, and he's collecting a swarm by having them walk onto that board. Things really haven't changed all that much. The only thing that's really changed is our understanding and a little bit of our tools and materials. So when I was a kid, the first method that I learned to catch a swarm was to grab a frame of comb, tape it to a stick and stick it up in the swarm. And when they were all on it, you carried them over to a box and dumped them in. It was really convenient to ride around on a bicycle with a stick, some tape, and a frame of bees and a cardboard box. However, that had its own drawbacks. And once we got up here, obviously that was not going to work well. And I think I got ahead of myself here. So when we started thinking about the coming up with a system that would work good here, we wanted to remember that the queen, it's all about the queen. And she spends all of her life virtually, except for short breeding flights and swarming, between 2 pieces of brood comb. And if you've ever chased her around inside your hive, you know she will always be on brood comb. We wanted to use that to our advantage. One of the reasons we wanted to stop and do all this is that both in terms of numbers, but it's really important for both the bees and the public that we have a really safe, calm method for catching and retrieving a swarm. As you know, there's so many ways to get the bees. You've seen them shaped into a box. People can catch them in a bag. But what's most important about all these methods is to work with the biology and not fight it. So what we wanted to do was to build a system that was very, very simple and we could use for almost anything. So we help the bees settle. If we need to add a scion or use tanging to do that, we do so. Then we place a throne in, and the throne has a piece of brood comb in it, a very small piece, in contact with that swarm. And all we have to do then is we know the queen will walk down and populate that comb. And so we don't need to shake the bees. We don't need to stir them up. You've all seen walking into a nuke on the ground. Well, we're just taking the nuke up to them in a lightweight manner and letting them walk in. And that's really the key benefit of the throne, is it's really just a lightweight nuke that you can have the bees walk into by taking the nuke to them instead of shaking them on the ground or something. So really, the throne is just a hack. And by that I mean it's using all the techniques of the past, the use of brood comb, the use of poles, the use of a bucket, a container. It's just a scion, but it has a lid on it. It's a nuke box that's light enough to raise. It's a bait box, and it's a package like a container that you don't have to transfer the bees from to take them home. When I first started out, like I said, I used a single piece of brood comb, but I quickly found it better to use 2 pieces to get the bees down quicker. But that was way too heavy and awkward, particularly once I got over about 15 feet. So then I developed, and the throne is really, really simple. I see a lot of variations out there on it, but I can assure you that each of the little parts here has been pretty well thought out, because balance is really, really crucial. And the biggest benefit of using a throning system is the bees want to be in the throne, as opposed to shaking them in a bucket where they could take flight if you're not fast enough, or you could spill them out. With the throne, all you do is lower it, and the bees will continue to land in it until it is full. And that means that you can just shut it up and take it with you. The throne, with some protection from direct sun, you can leave it until dark. You just open the front and the bees will all be in, and then you can come seal it up. It can be used on the ground for a ground swarm, just like a nuke. You see a before and after picture. How little of a piece of brood comb is necessary to generate this response. You don't, one of the things we want to do is keep it incredibly light so that we can reach up high, because once it gets full of 4 or 5 pounds of bees, it's not as light anymore. And it's really important to understand that they need very little of that brood comb to change their behavior. Again, being light, it gives us reach, 30 feet. The first step is to bring the throne into contact with the swarm to allow them to walk in. The queen will not take flight readily. Sometimes we can get them down to a box, but in general, she will walk a lot faster than she will fly. Once I know that she's in there, and by that I mean I can see the change in activity around the vents, then I just have to bring it home. It's really important to shift the mood of the bees by putting a lid on it. It's still a little nervous to them when the top is open. I joke about, if you go to an open house and it's a beautiful house and the landscaping's good, but it doesn't have a roof, you're probably not going to put an offer on it. So it becomes very good to put a lid on it. Then we either use a brush or we shake the limb that the remaining bees on, because we want them to fly and use their senses to locate the queen who's in the throne. So then we just allow the remaining bees, you can either close it up and let them, in this case, the swarm was so big that I just closed it up. I let all the bees walk onto the throne, and then I used one of my small vacuums to clean off the outside. If it's a normal size swarm, you can just wait until dark and they should all be inside, and you can just put the plug back in. It's easy to transport them. They're just like a package. You've got a bunch of bees. You can feed them through the screened vents by either putting a sponge soaked in sugar water, or I do have some small bottles that I've also used. We frequently keep them for 2 or 3 days in the thrones. We keep them in a cool, dark place and feed them until we either have some of the Girl Scout hives that I have to repopulate or something until I can make arrangements to take them and dump them into those hives. When you are done with the swarm collection, I do want you to think about what you're leaving, and particularly the use of handouts. Make sure the people's questions are all done. It's very important to represent your community and to try and reduce any of their concerns. I'm not sure what this slide was. This is if we want to talk about other things. I am going to provide both of these presentations to your host, and she can share the PDFs with you at her convenience.
Thank
So
you, DW.
I'm going to bring this down and open it up to any questions about throning and why we do it.
Well, I have a question I'd like to start out with. So I know that you've mentioned before how important it is to possibly practice, right? To practice your throning technique. And so is there any tips or tricks as far as the technique with the, what's considered too high? How much weight does that really, help? What do you need to factor in with the weight, that kind of thing?
When I was talking about practicing, in many ways, the main thing you have to practice with is your pole. We use a pole that allows us to raise the throne straight up and down. If you are using a simpler pole like a pool sweep pole or something that's a little more fixed in length, you're going to need to practice that. And by practice, I mean put 3 pounds of dirt or sand or something in that throne. It really behaves differently between empty and full. So I really recommend practicing with your pole. I would say that the majority of first-time accidents are dumping it, which is never a good public look, particularly if you people ask me all the time, and I rarely use a suit around my house or something when I'm checking on my bees, but I always wear virtually a full pullover when I'm doing a public swarm retrieval, because I want to finish. I don't want to have an accident and change these people's opinion of this nice, calm thing I was doing up until that point. So I find the suit basically is keeping the few that might be an irritant away, but I don't want to have to leave a situation, and particularly when I've dumped bees out or not. So it's really good it's also something to practice with, is how are you going to leave the throne up there for that 5 to 10 minutes that it takes for the queen to walk in. So that's something to practice also. You have to learn how to lean it against things. One of the things that I think I need to make more clear in my posts about building them is that you do need an attachment on the end of your pole to make sure that you can lock into that bucket. I think I have a post. I'll make sure that that's more appropriate or easier for people to find, but you can't have that throne rotating, and you can't have it falling off, when you bring it down. So it is important to practice that connection also. When everything else fails, get a couple big pieces of duct tape, but make sure that throne is secure on your pole. But bringing it down, I think you've all seen probably where people have used water bottles and 5-gallon buckets on the end of poles and shook bees, and then tipped, a 25-foot pole down and watched it come much quicker than they thought. and it makes a great YouTube video, but I really don't want to either be the observer or the beekeeper doing that. So that's why I talk about practicing. It's really practicing with your pole and the weight on the end of the pole.
Got it. Thank you. And I love that you want to focus on making sure that we're good ambassadors for beekeeping, because oftentimes people in the public don't necessarily know much about bees and they've never really interacted with beekeepers. So for them, we are the face of that, retrieval, right? And it's so critical that we actually are good ambassadors. So here we go. I know that Paul had a question. I'm going to pass the mic on to him.
Uh-oh,
Can really appreciate how much bees weigh when you get them in.
can't hear him.
You get it 26. You get take an empty throne and you get it up on a pole 26 feet up in the air. It's unwieldy enough. You now imagine adding 5 pounds of bees
Paul.
to that.
I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Oh, no, I was just saying, you take an empty throne and you put it on the end of a 26-foot pole. And if you've never done it, you have no idea how unwieldy that is. Now imagine adding bees to that. And I don't think a lot of people can appreciate just how much even a small swarm weighs and how much it's going to change the dynamics of the whole situation.
I broke my very first pole with my version 1, which I don't think I've ever showed a picture of. My very first throne bucket, heavier, pretty beefy parts on the inside. And I put it up, a nice big swarm, maybe 5 pound total. And that pole was a fixed length pole, about 20 foot. I mean, it was 2 10-foot sections, but it was, once they were together, they weren't coming apart. And I bounced that bucket right off the ground and broke because the pole bent in half. And that was a aluminum pole, brand new. So I learned real quickly that I had to deal with that weight.
Well, and one of the questions we have here is from Irene. She asks, what do you use for the poll? I know that you talked about that a little bit ago. So Irene, DW does make some recommendations. There's a couple that you can get online. But DW use specifically a telescoping pole. That's the most important feature, correct?
Yeah, I use a 24-foot telescoping pole. It's 4 sections, each approximately 6 foot in length. It's for tall people, it works really good. It's a little hard to reach to extend it if you're shorter. So I recommend either a 2-foot stool or just good practice. But I have links to a couple of them, but it's a 4-piece, 24-foot telescoping pole. It's designed for some lightweight tree trimming and high window washing and things like that. And they're only about, I think, $75, but I'll tell you, it works really well. It's a good pole. And there's several out there by similar manufacturers. So that I'll make sure you can go to my Facebook page, and it's pretty easy to find in the search thing, or PM me and I can send you a link to the post on polls.
And you know what I did is I just pulled up the PDF of your Facebook page too. So just make sure you go in. You can just search for BlueGreenHorizons, and you can even, can you do a search on your Facebook page, DW?
Yes. Yeah.
So you can do a
So
search.
if you go to post, that's reviews. If you go to post, there's a
reviews.
search function.
Oh, let's see. I wonder if I can get there.
And if you type the word index, you will get index posts on things like vacuum cleaners and tools and the throne, where I have an index of maybe 5 to 10 posts on each of those subjects.
Okay, let me see if I can bring this up real quick.
Hey, excuse me, when you talk
Yes.
about tagging a swarm, is that when you make that big gonging sound?
Yeah,
what do you-
well, it
And what
doesn't
do
have
you
to be.
use?
So, the myth about tanging is that it imitates a thunderstorm. The reality is actually closer, that worker bees actually emit a piping sound to communicate some swarm behaviors. Seeley has published a couple things on it. And that frequency is between 200 and 500 hertz, which is fairly low, which is just about the same hertz as a metal pot and a hive tool. So what we do with tanging is tells bees to either take off or land. So obviously you don't want to walk up to your hive and start beating on a metal pot and have a swarm take off. But if a swarm is in the air, tanging will cause them to settle into a cluster. High likelihood of it, actually. It doesn't have to be super loud or anything, but it needs to be fairly strong and persistent. It's not a gonging, it's more of a ding, 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 ding sound. But it's very effective. And I've done it. I've posted some videos on it. So sometimes when we'll show up to a swarm call, either we're early or late, and they might be taking off, we will tang to get them settled back down. And so one of the things you'll always see on the side of my truck is my metal pot.
And
Because
a
if you-
metal pot, and what tool, what did you hit
Just
it with?
a hive tool, just
Oh, a
two
hive
metal
tool.
tools. And if it's a round pot has a lot of frequencies in it when you strike it. So that's generally two flat pieces of metal don't work as well as a round pot.
Yeah, that's awesome. That'd be neat to do sometime. Thanks.
Yeah, it's like the cattle call for bees. It's amazing.
So one warning though. So one of the people that I first, I don't want to date and say how many decades ago it was, but one of the people that he was a commercial person and kind of an old kind of codger. We were out adding supers onto honey supers onto about 50 hives. And in our disruption, one took off. So he grabbed his pot and walked out in the middle of the field. And I mean, there wasn't any trees for, probably 300 feet around these hives. It was way out in the middle of an Oregon clover field. Anyway, he started tanging and they settled on him because his bee suit was about as much of a scion as anything. I mean, it was hard. We called it the impermeable suit because there was so much wax on it that no bee could sting anybody through it. And it's Oregon, so we didn't worry about the heat up there. But yeah, they settled right on him, right? And of course, he chuckled about it, but he said he kept his mouth shut for the longest time he ever had in his life.
DW, did you say that was a cast iron or an aluminum pot? An aluminum
I
would
don't
probably
think
sound better.
I don't think it matters. The one I have is an old steel pot that I wouldn't use for anything else. So
it has a dedicated purpose. Yeah.
yeah, it actually had been in my garden for a long time. I used to scoop dirt out of different bags to make my soil mixes. It just has a really nice handle to it. So now it's in my truck.
Very good. Very good. All
But
right. Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
it generally will not move them as much as people think. People think that they can tang and get them out of a tree, and I've not seen that. I've not seen that work.
Got it. Well, it's still fascinating. So very cool. I'm looking through the chat. I don't think I see any other questions come through there. Is there anybody else that would like to go ahead and unmute themselves and pose a question?
think we're close to the end of our time anyway, so.
Yeah, I think we are. Let me, I'm going to share my screen one last time here. So just as a reminder, so our next meeting will be Thursday, June 10th. Look for email and Facebook announcements for that. You can reach us anytime at bigvalleybeekeepers@gmail.com. And just as a reminder, you know, we are collecting our memberships for 2021. And we're super excited to have gone back to some in-person meetings. We're also going to be live streaming. So, so definitely reach out to us if you have any questions. And I want to thank Dave Spees and Paul Lockhart for actually joining me here in the hotel banquet room, so or boardroom. So we really, I appreciate seeing them here. Let's see. Any last notes? This was recorded, so we will get that posted. And just final, DW, thank you so much. You helped us tremendously today. We learned so much. And every time I leave, kind of having to process everything that you've shared, and then I come up with questions later. So. You are a wealth of knowledge and you're an inspiration, and thank you for being such an awesome beekeeping steward. I think that makes a huge difference, and we really appreciate your time. All right, with that, we're going to excuse everybody. Have a great rest of your evening, and thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right, take
Thank
care.
you.
All right, bye-bye.